As the Senior Bowl wraps up this week, there's definitely some guys that have bolstered their draft stock, and there's definitely been some guys that have dropped down. I think, especially in the quarterback room, we've seen some of the biggest jumps happen. More specifically with Mac Jones himself, he didn't play in today's game, but I honestly think he did himself a huge favor. I think he really solidified himself this week as a mid to late first round pick, and I think there's a lot of roles where he can fit into with, especially the Patriots at 15. I think he really locked himself in as a first round pick this year.
I agree. I think he's a great fit with the New England Patriots, especially considering that Bill Belichick and Nick Saban connection. I think that what Mac Jones does well fits that Josh McDaniels and Bill Belichick offensive scheme to a T, and I think that could be a perfect pairing in the middle of the first round.
Oh, definitely. I think that real game manager role is like Josh McDaniels likes, attacking across the middle of the field in the short passing game. I think Mac Jones has thrived in that. I think a big thing that's going to be kept in mind wherever Mac Jones goes. I think he will need a supporting cast around him. I definitely don't think he's going to elevate an entire offense by himself, but he definitely is worth a first round pick. In New England, they have some weapons, but if they're going to take Mac Jones in the first, they definitely need to come back in the second and get a legitimate number one wide receiver for that football team.
How do you feel about a guy like Mac Jones squeezing into the top eight going to Carolina, considering that Matt Rule said earlier, either today or yesterday, that last season the Carolina Panthers were in about 6 games that ended in a one score or less deficit, and that if they had a guy like Mac Jones who could go out there and win games like he's proven at Alabama, they could win maybe 4 of those games and then maybe they squeak into the playoffs.
Definitely. I think, once again, Mac Jones is that prototypical Matt Rule quarterback that he likes. I think 8 in the top 10 at pick 8, I think would be a little bit early. Maybe if the Panthers would want to trade back in the draft and get back into the mid-teens. I don't really know who would be moving up to get into to the 8th overall pick, but if they slid back a little bit or if they maybe traded back up late in the first, I think, once again, Matt Rule and Mac Jones would be a really good pairing. I think Teddy Bridgewater and Mac Jones do play quite similarly, so I don't really know how much of a big boost it'll give to the quarterback room. But like I said, though, down in Carolina, you got Christian McCaffrey, Robbie Anderson, DJ Moore. They're able to re-sign Curtis Samuel. Definitely be a really strong supporting cast for Mac Jones. So overall, like I said, Mac Jones definitely took the biggest jump this past weekend. I think another guy that really needs to be mentioned as one of the probably bigger losers from this week would be Jamie Newman. I think throughout the practice week, he showed some flashes. He also had some pretty poor days. Like on Thursday, he had a handful of interceptions he's threw. A lot of them were on deep shots. He was pressing the ball down the field, trying to make that big play happen. But it was definitely not the day that he wanted on Thursday. And even coming today in the game, I think he flashed a little bit, but he just didn't show enough to really push himself into that third, maybe late second round pick conversation. I know a lot of people coming to this year, they had him as one of the top QBs, but he opted out. So that is a big storyline. On top of that, in the game, he looked really rusty with his pocket presence. I think he held onto the ball for way too long. I think guys like Kellen Mond and Ian Book definitely are pushing to jump him right now in quarterback rankings. I think, like I said, Ian Book and Kellen Mond did a great job today of really bolstering their draft stock.
So I agree with Jamie Newman. I think that he did hold on to the ball too long, and I think that he really, really needed this game. He really needed to outperform those players to solidify his stock as a third or fourth round draft pick this year, and he just really didn't do it. I needed to see more from him, and I didn't see it. I just, I really don't think that he should have opted out for Georgia. I think that he needed this season more than any other prospect, but I understand that in a year with COVID, for personal reasons, he needed to. But he really needed this game, and he put all of his chips on this game, and I think that he came up a little short today.
Definitely. I think he had probably the highest expectations for this game to really take that jump, really jump in his draft stock, and I don't really think he did that quite well today. A couple of the other smaller quarterbacks from the Senior Bowl today, Sam Ellinger and Felipe Franks, they played a solid game. They're once again in that day 3 quarterback situation. They're going to be battling for a roster spot, I think, come day 1. I think Sam Ellinger is probably the number 1 quarterback option for that late 6th, early 7th round pick conversation. He has some upside, but like I said, they'll be battling for roster spots. They're definitely project QBs. But definitely Mac Jones, I think, is the biggest winner from the week. Jamie Newman, you would have liked to see a little bit more from him. But overall, the quarterbacks did a great job as a whole of really bolstering their draft stock, in my opinion.
I agree. Biggest thing going for Sam Ellinger is his experience. He's played so many games for Texas. I feel like he's been playing there for about 10 years.
That is very true. Jumping on over to the running backs, though, I think really the clear-cut number 1 guy that was the biggest winner from this week, especially from today's game, Michael Carter, putting up 60 yards and a touchdown on only 8 carries today. Had a really nice 20-some yard run where he finished with a lot of leg drive, getting into the end zone. A big playmaker at UNC. He was there with Javonte Williams. Both those guys were a lethal duo throughout this year, and I think Michael Carter came away this week as the biggest winner out of the backfields.
I agree. His burst and agility is exceptional. I think his contact balance is outstanding. I think as a runner, he's got really good instincts coupled with that physical ability, like I mentioned, with his agility and his contact balance. I think he's going to be an exceptional pro. I think he's going to be someone that's part of a committee, and he has a role in an offense. I don't think he's going to be a primary ball carrier, but I think that there's definitely a place for him in an NFL offense.
Definitely. If he came in as a change of pace back for any NFL team, I don't think anybody would be complaining about that. A very elite level change of pace back, in my opinion, at the next level. Another guy I think that kind of bolstered his draft stock this week, had a pretty solid week. I think he really kind of solidified himself and where he was at in people's draft boards was Kylan Hill.
Absolutely
He didn't really
not.
come off, he didn't flash, and he didn't really jump anybody in his draft rankings, but I think he just had a good week. He had a good enough week to really solidify himself as a day 3 pick, and I don't think he could really complain about his Senior Bowl week.
I agree. I like his feet. I think that he plays behind his pads really well. I think he's kind of struggles a little bit in terms of like lateral agility, which isn't a big deal necessarily for the way that he plays. But I think that it's really going to cap his upside as a player. I think that he's going to lack the ability to be a true primary back, but much like in the way of Michael Carter, I think that he's going to be able to play in a role. He's just going to be that flip side of the role where he's like the grinder, almost like a Devin Singletary type.
Definitely. I think, especially with the league kind of pushing out of the true I formation heavy sets, I think it'll be hard for him to find a role in a lot of teams, but definitely coming in the I formation, really kind of grounding it out in the short yardage situations. I think that's where he's going to thrive at in the NFL, and I think he really solidified himself like that this week at the Senior Bowl, is that he can be that short yardage back at the next level. And I know you had some thoughts on Elijah Mitchell.
Yeah, I like him. I know he didn't really flash what I necessarily would have wanted to see at the Senior Bowl, but watching his tape from this last year for the Raging Cajuns and the year prior, I just think that he reminds me a lot of Marlon Mack, and I think in the right situation, I think that he's going to potentially carve out a role. Look at Marlon Mack's year 2 years ago. I'm pretty sure he got about 1,500 total scrimmage yards, and an offense like that, like with the Colts, if he was on a team that utilizes its players to their potential like that, I think that he could have a year like that given the circumstances around him working out in his favor. Like I said, the Senior Bowl didn't really show his full potential, but I just want him to be watched by the community more often.
Definitely. So I think overall it's fair to say that there wasn't really a lot of big flashes out of the backfield this past week. I think Michael Carter was the biggest winner, just once again solidifying him where he was at. Smaller school guys, Kylan Hill, Elijah Mitchell, they both had solid weeks. I wouldn't say there was any real big losers. Definitely Michael Carter's the big winner out of the backfields. Jumping into the O-line side of things, I think this is probably one of the deepest positions to unpack from this past week. We saw a lot of small school guys jump up. I think starting with the big schools, though, some of the bigger losers from the week, I think Alex Leatherwood from Alabama and Deontay Brown, I think both of them did not really flash how people were hoping they would, especially Alex Leatherwood. Some people were saying that he could be possibly pushing for tackle number 1 this year, but I think he has heavy feet. He struggled in the pass pro one-on-ones. I think Quincy Roche got him beat 3 times in a row in one-on-ones in one of the days from practice. I was hoping for more from Alex Leatherwood. He just looks heavy feet. He's really heavy set with his feet, and it just allows people to bend the corner on him really easily.
Yeah, I agree. I think that he's got really heavy feet, and I think that he's really slow getting out of his stance, and speed rushes are a particular issue for him. For a big man like that, I was really hoping that his punch was going to be more violent, and it really wasn't. A lot of people talk about him making the switch to guard or center. I'm just not sure that he's got the feet for that either. I'm not really sure that he's going to be an outstanding pro. I think he's going to be better served bumping inside, but I was not impressed with his day.
Definitely. And then, like I said, his partner down there in Alabama, Deontay Brown, I also don't think he really jumped off the tape that well. There's a couple short yardage, 4th and short situations from the game today where he absolutely got stonewalled at the line of scrimmage and didn't get a lot of movement. He's 360 pounds, nicknamed Cornbread. You would want to see him be a road grader and really create some running lanes. I just didn't see that out of him today. And one-on-ones, like I said, at 360, he just didn't move extremely fluid that you would want to see at the next level. Once again, he's a project. I think both of them are project offensive linemen. They have upsides, but there's no doubt they do have some downsides.
I agree. For a guy with the nickname Cornbread, he sure moves like molasses. He's a slow runner. I do want to see him be a road grader in the run game, but yeah, he was kind of just catching guys today. Like, he wasn't leg drive wasn't there. The initial punch wasn't there. At one point, I believe that they even had him go out on a screen as a lead blocker, and he was just lumbering up that field. He wasn't even in front of the running back to make a play. The running back beat him to the spot.
Definitely, definitely. So those are two of probably the bigger losers from this week. I think there's three small school guys that I really, or actually four small school guys I really want to talk about. I think had some massive weeks. Dante Smith from East Carolina, David Moore from Grambling, and then Spencer Brown from UNI, and also Dylan Radunez from North Dakota State. I think they all did a lot in one-on-ones this week. They dominated, especially Dante Smith. He's really light on his feet. He's a little undersized at 285, and I know that was a lot of concern for him coming into the draft is, can he really play at the next level at 285, 290, being 6'4"? I think he blew people away with his punch. He's a very heavy hands when he punches. He stonewalled Quincy Roche on a couple reps. I think he could come in the league. He's definitely a project offensive line. Has some room to grow still. But if he can come in as a late pick and he could be your sixth offensive lineman, your Swiss Army knife. He took some reps at guard, took some reps at both sides of the tackles. I think he's that guy that you can plug him in at any position on the offensive line. I think he would thrive.
Yeah, I didn't get to see very much of him, but I did get to watch Spencer Brown, Jalen Moore, and who was the last one that you mentioned? And Dylan Radunez. They all look exceptional, I believe. I don't know how much of Jalen Moore you got to witness, but I really like him.
I was talking about David Moore from Grambling State, a small little FCS school. I loved his tape. He took on a couple one-on-one reps against Marvin Wilson, and he was just a little meatball in the middle, stonewalling people. Once again, I think he's a great late-round pick for teams that need interior offensive line help. Like I said, it's a little bit of a jump in competition, but he's an absolute heavy-setted hands. He's a road grader, and when he gets his hands on you in pass pro, he absolutely locks you up.
Okay, you're talking about David Moore. Okay, yeah, I actually have some concerns with his game. Osa Odigizua, he was dominating him in the Senior Bowl game. I don't know if you got to witness that. I don't know if you've watched much of that game so far, but he was dominating him on the interior.
Definitely, yeah. Inside, he had some struggles during the game, but I really was impressed with his one-on-one reps. That's where I think he really bolstered his draft stock, is really how heavy set his hands were and how when he latches his hands on you, you're not going anywhere. In the game, he had some struggles, but I think overall he did show some flashes where he jumped up at my draft board personally. But also, with the smaller school prospects from the FCS schools, I know the two big tackle names coming out today, Spencer Brown and Dylan Radunez. I think they both had pretty solid days. Spencer Brown, I think, allowed a sack in the game today when he overset on, I believe it was Quincy Roche that he actually allowed the sack on. I think overall both those guys are guys that are just improving their draft stock day by day. Spencer Brown staying at 6'9". He's a massive human being, has long arms. I think he's that prototypical right tackle where obviously he obviously needs some work and he's a project, but I think he had a really solid week to really bolster his status in the draft coming up.
Yeah, long arms, big hands. He's going to work well in his zone running scheme. He's really good in the run game, and I see constant improvement in the pass protection game.
Definitely. So overall, I think the small school guys, the FCS guys, did pretty solid. I think all of them improved their draft stock for the most part. And then we do have to touch on one of the biggest offensive linemen, I would say, is the kid from Whitewater, the D3. Can't seem to remember his name.
Quinton Manhertz.
Yeah, Quinn Meinerz. I gotta say, he was absolutely phenomenal. He was a road grader. He was running people over. Even his tape from Whitewater, of course, it's only D3, smaller school competition. But when I'm telling you, he was knocking dudes out. He was knocking dudes out on tape, and he came to the Senior Bowl, and I think he was doing that exact same thing, running people over all week.
He had a really good anchor. That's what I really noticed from his game.
Definitely super strong. I think he's 6'3", 320. There's a video of him dunking, so he's athletic, has explosiveness. He's just an absolute road grader. Once again, another small school prospect I think is jumping up people's draft boards this week.
I agree.
And then, of course, there's some of the other names that are coming from the interior. I think Creed Humphrey had a really solid week. I think he solidified himself as a really strong interior offensive lineman. He wasn't really delivering a lot of big blows, but when he got his hands on you, he was just stonewalling people. And I think, once again, he's a really good fit late in the first, early in the second. I think he had to be a solid fit for a team like the Chiefs that really just need offensive line help across the board.
Yeah, I agree. I think he'd be a perfect fit with the Chiefs.
And then there's also guys like Trey Smith we should touch on. Some people have him as the number one interior lineman out of this draft. Definitely an absolute road grader. He'll run people over. In one-on-ones, he was getting exposed a little bit, but I think his run blocking ability and his ability to run people over, I think at the end of the day is going to solidify him enough. I think a team like the Baltimore Ravens would be dumb if they passed on him. I think he would be a perfect fit in one of those run-heavy schemes.
Some people even like him at tackle.
I don't know how much about tackle. I really would like him at guard, teeing off on nose tackles, or really on the backside of zone plays, or even in the pulling game. I think he's just an absolute road grader that could really crease some big lanes.
I agree. I don't really see him being his best self at tackle, but I don't know how much of the Packers games you've seen, but Elton Jenkins has been a super versatile weapon for them. And if Trey Smith could even be 75% of what Elton Jenkins was for Green Bay, then I think that that's like just the versatility that he's shown and how important that is. How the Packers moved Elton Jenkins all over the line. If Trey Smith could do that for an offense, that is an invaluable asset of his.
Definitely, definitely. I was thinking even the 49ers would be a good landing spot for him in the second round if they could get him on the inside of that offensive line. They like to run a lot of that Kyle Shanahan wide zone. I think he'd be creasing a lot of cutback lanes for those running backs. Overall, I think his strongest suit, I think he's probably one of the best run blocking offensive linemen we've seen in the last couple of years. Obviously, still needs some work on his one-on-one pass pros, but at the end of the day, I think we've seen what we wanted to see from Trey Smith this past week.
Another thing, health. I just want that man to stay healthy.
That is true. Injuries are always a concern, but at the end of the day, I think he had a solid week, and I think he's one of the big winners again. I think Creed Humphrey, Trey Smith, all those smaller school guys all had pretty solid weeks. I think one of the biggest losers from the week is actually from a Big Ten school, Alaric Jackson. He just did not look smooth. He did not look fluid. He looked really tight in the hips, and he really just looked like he didn't belong at the Senior Bowl, in all honesty.
I agree. He really, really struggled. I hate to say it, but he honestly looked useless. They were using him at tackle. They were bumping him in at guard, and no matter where he went, he was just getting beat by everybody.
He just looked undersized compared to the people around him. He is really skinny in the lower half, and you could see it in one-on-ones. He was getting bullied around.
Yeah, he just, he lacks that anchor.
So overall, the offensive linemen, there were some big winners from the small schools, some big winners on the inside. Creed Humphrey, Trey Smith. Definitely some big losers with Alex Leatherwood and the Bama kids. I think a really strong core we have to talk about is the receiving core from this past week. And more specifically, I really want to talk about those guys from Clemson, like Amari Rodgers. I think he had a phenomenal week. I think he's moving up the draft boards. And who's that other Clemson receiver I'm thinking about? Cornell Powell, yes. Two guys that I think had phenomenal weeks this week.
I really liked Cornell Powell this week. He really proved a lot to me. He's got that long speed, but at the same time, like he's shown that nuance in his short and intermediate route running to like get off on breaks and with clean hands. People aren't getting hands on him, and he's got a big body too, and he's got that speed. I think he's got a chance to shoot up some people's boards.
Definitely. Another guy that I think flashed in the game today was Josh Palmer from Tennessee. He had a really nice touchdown catch. It was a little RPO. It was one-on-one man coverage, but he won his release extremely well. I think he's another late-round guy that I think's worth taking a second look at. Also, another big name. I think the biggest winner from this week is the cat from Florida, Kadarius Toney. I think he had a phenomenal one-on-one session. I know he didn't play much in the game today, but one-on-ones, he was basically a joystick out there. He was shaking defenders left and right.
Yeah, just to go back to Josh Palmer real quick, his ability off the line to get a free release, and then his ability to beat receivers down the sideline and stack that cornerback is outstanding. He's done that all week long, and I've been really impressed by that. Now to go back to Kadarius Toney, he's just a joystick. He's so creative in his breaks, and he is able to just shake defenders. He's just baking kids out there.
Definitely. Another guy I really want to talk about from South Carolina, Shi Smith, one of the, I think, might have just solidified himself as the best slot receiver in the draft. Had a phenomenal game, has had a solid week. I think he's probably going to be one of the steals at the slot receiver position in the draft.
Yeah, he runs great routes. He catches balls outside of his frame. He's a hands catcher. He's made a couple diving catches today. He's really shown to be a reliable set of hands over the middle. Do you want to talk about Dwayne Eskridge at all? Okay, cool. Because I really, really liked him. I thought he was competing with those other receivers that we mentioned to have the most improved draft stock over this time at the Senior Bowl. His route running is crisp. He's got good ball skills. I think that he could be a really good slot at the next level, and I can even think he could bump outside.
Definitely, definitely. So overall, like I said, the receivers, I think they all really bolstered their draft stock. I don't think there's a lot of guys that really were big losers. I think they all had phenomenal weeks.
I agree.
So, like I said, when I really want to put the spotlight on Patrick Jones. I've been waiting to talk about Patrick Jones because I think he had a phenomenal game. He didn't really flash that well throughout the week, but he came away with a couple sacks from the game. And there's also reports coming out that he talked with the Steelers at the Senior Bowl, and I think he could be a perfect fit in the second round with the Steelers. I think he could really replace that Bud Dupree role. I don't think they're going to have money to re-sign him. I think Patrick Jones, once again, is an extremely efficient edge rusher. I think in his 22-some games he started at Pittsburgh, he's racked up, I think, 17 and a half sacks, an extremely productive guy off the edge. The only knock I have with him, like I said, when he did move inside, he really wasn't super efficient. He's really a limited guy as a 4-3 hand of the dirt defensive end. I didn't really see him. I would like to see him kind of flow in coverage a little bit better. But like I said, at the end of the day, Patrick Jones I think is one of the big winners from this week, flying up in the edge defender role.
I agree. I really liked him. I thought his versatility on an offensive line. Yeah, sure, he's not great on the inside, but just that versatility, being able to bump inside if it needs to. And when you mentioned the Steelers, yeah, I think he'd be a seamless replacement for Bud Dupree because I don't think that they're going to be able to bring him back financially.
Definitely. I think some of the other edge rushers that I really were liking this week, I think everybody's seen it. Quincy Roche, I think he might have been the biggest winner. And one-on-ones, he seemed almost unstoppable at points.
Oh, I loved Quincy Roche this last week. He's really shown a dominance. So I'm thinking he's pressing for my number one edge rusher in this class.
Definitely. I think flipping gears, we're talking about number one edge rushers. I also think Carlos Basham has to be on people's radars. He had another phenomenal this week. And in my opinion, I think he came away as the biggest winner out of the edge rusher conversation. I think he's phenomenally explosive off the edge. I think he can bump down and play three tech on the inside a little bit. He has the size to do it, but he's also explosive off the edge.
Yeah, and like I said, once again, like we're coming back to it, versatility. When these defensive linemen can bump all over the defensive line, it is an outstanding asset for them. And Carlos Basham has been dominating people at this last week at the Senior Bowl.
Definitely. I think those three guys are probably the biggest winners off the edge this past week. I really want to flip the gears now and talk about another smaller school prospect that I think had a phenomenal week as well. Cameron Sample from Tulane didn't really have a very productive year his last year in college. I think he racked up 5.5 sacks, but he's definitely a guy on the inside that you could probably get in the later end of the draft, and I think he could add a lot of interior pass rush. And a guy that a team that I really want to see him tied with would be like a Seahawks type of team. He's not going to really be an every down player, but I definitely think he could come in on third downs and produce a lot of pressure up the middle. He was absolutely torching guys in the interior and one-on-ones this past week. And once again, like I said, he's one of my favorite guys from this past week.
I agree. And one-on-ones, that was his game. He was absolutely taking it to guys on the inside. It was outstanding.
I think another guy we have to talk about on the inside is Marvin Wilson. He's an up and down guy. Some people value him really high. Some people don't like him that much. And I think one-on-ones he won a lot. The only thing I want to see more is him build some pass rush moves into his arsenal. He really seemed like a kind of a one-trick pony when he was just bull rushing everybody.
I agree. In terms of run defense, he's there. That's what you want. He's what you want in run defense. But yeah, my issue with him is that he'll break into the pocket. He'll make it so a quarterback can't step up. But he needs to develop a plan once he gets in there. He needs to find a way to disengage with that lineman and actually get sacks. He's just a space eater. And so he needs to develop that second level of his attack.
Definitely, definitely. I really want to see him kind of build off his pass rush arsenal. Once again, like I said, there's a lot of big winners from the defensive line group specifically. Those guys I think are the ones that really jumped off the screen the most this past week.
I loved Osa Odigizua. I thought he looked absolutely incredible. His hands are long. He's got long arms, big hands. He's got an outstanding reach. He can bump outside, inside. He was beating people with speed, with power. He had a few counters that he won with to get pressure on the quarterback. He's just always around the quarterback. I thought he looked outstanding this last week.
Definitely. Overall, like I said, I would probably say the biggest winners, I would probably be a toss-up between Quincy Roche and Carlos Basham. I think they both solidified themselves as first-round picks over this past weekend. I believe, actually, Levi Osornrake, I can't pronounce his name. I believe... No, I'm thinking about it. I'm thinking about someone else now. But overall, moving on to the linebackers, I think clearly probably one of the biggest winners and one of the biggest upside players I think you can take at linebacker is Jabril Cox from LSU, the grad transfer from North Dakota State. He was phenomenal at the Senior Bowl, and talk about utility. He can play the nickel role, he can play that sub linebacker role, and he can even rush off the edge. I think he can do everything you want as a defender in the second level.
I agree. I think with how well he's played this last week, I think he's kind of bumped himself into that definitely a third round pick. Like he could challenge to get to the second round to a middle linebacker. needy team.
Definitely. I think Jabril Cox is athletic. I think he can really be a plug and play anywhere on the field. Over,
Kind of seemed like a poor man's Devin Bush to me.
Definitely. I think he's extremely athletic, and I think he led the FCS a couple years ago in sacks, so he can also rush off the edge, so he can really do everything you ask for him. And like I said, when it comes to defense, you want guys that can really fit in any role, basically.
Yeah, I agree.
Overall, when you look at the secondary, there's not a lot of guys that jumped off the screen to me this past week. A lot of them looked pretty rough. Georgia's safety / corner, Mark Webb, he had a pretty rough week. I've seen him kind of getting picked on in one-on-ones. Really just didn't seem like he had that elite level speed to keep up with the receivers.
Yeah, I agree. I wasn't really impressed by a whole lot of defensive backs in this class or in this Senior Bowl. To be honest, the only two that I really walked away with a good taste in my mouth with is Richie Grant and Aaron Robinson.
Yeah, those guys I think are the only ones that really kind of bolstered themselves this week. A lot of them were kind of getting torched throughout this entire week, basically. I think both the Georgia corners, I think, kind of were getting embarrassed almost.
Yeah, they were really good. They were really getting embarrassed, especially against Kadarius Toney on one-on-ones. They really got exposed.
Definitely. Richie Grant, though, like you said, though, I think he had a phenomenal week. Talk about a Swiss Army knife in the secondary. I think he can roll down and play that corner role. He's a phenomenal safety. I think, once again, he's another utility guy that you can move him around anywhere in the secondary. I think he'll do just fine.
Yeah, one guy that people have really high up their boards is Robert Rochelle out of Central Arkansas. I think he had a really, really rough week.
Oh, definitely. Like I said, I think a lot of the cornerbacks didn't have the week they were hoping for.
Yeah. Byron Mills actually looked a lot better than I thought. Out of North Carolina Central, really small school. He had some up and down play. He had some really, really good plays, and then he had some just bone call plays where he was biting on double moves that he should know better than. And then the last guy that I wanted to talk about was the Ifeitu Melifonwu. Did you see much of him this week?
I do not believe so, no.
He's Obi Melifonwu's younger brother. He's out of Syracuse. He's pretty athletic. He's really good. He's more of a nickel in my opinion. He could play safety, but they have him playing corner because that's what they do at the Senior Bowl. They kind of bump you all over the place. He kind of got embarrassed a little bit by Fitzpatrick, the receiver out of Louisville. He really got embarrassed by him on the outside, but I know he's better than that, and I just don't want people to base what he is off of just his Senior Bowl because he is better than that. I just think that he might have been playing out of position. I think he's going to be better served as a safety.
Definitely. I think overall, as the whole defensive side of the ball, I think that the spotlight can't really be on the secondary. I think a lot of them had rough weeks. I do actually want to touch on Trey Brown. I think he actually did have a pretty solid week as a whole as one of the cornerbacks, especially in practice. But like I said, besides a handful of names in the secondary, it was a pretty ugly week.
Yeah, there wasn't really a whole lot of winners in the secondary, to be honest.
Overall, I think, to say the most part on the defense, I say the biggest winners would be Cameron Sample, Quincy Roche, and Carlos Basham would probably be the three biggest winners. Like I said, those are all defensive linemen, all really strong pass rushers, and in a league that's based around and moving heavy to passing, I think those three guys did their draft stocks the best this past week.
Yeah, I agree. The last couple guys that I want to touch on that I think that we might have missed over. Did you get to see much of Chauncey Golston out of Iowa?
Yes, I saw a decent bit of him. He flashed here and there. Once again, I think he just kind of held his draft position where it was at.
Yeah, I still think he had a really good week. I think that he proved that he can do some things that maybe not a lot of people saw from him, and I think he's got a little bit of versatility as well. And the last guy is Janarius Robinson. Did you see much of him? So he's another guy. He's got really, really long arms, really, really long hands. He's actually really, really good at getting upfield, getting the offensive lineman to open his hips, and then has an arsenal of counters to flip his hips, get back inside, and get pressure on that quarterback. He really impressed me this week. I thought he was a big winner as well.
Definitely. Overall, I think my top three biggest winners, I think, would have to be Mac Jones, Kadarius Toney, and probably Quincy Roche from this past week. Maybe Carlos Basham could fall in there. But those are the three guys I think that really moved up my draft board through this past week.
My big three for that would probably be Dylan Rundez, Osa Odigizua, and then my final would probably be Josh Palmer. Honestly, he really impressed me this week.
Yeah, definitely. There's no doubt about it that there's been a lot of guys that improved their draft stock this weekend, were big winners. There were a handful of losers, but there's no doubt about it. Like I said, a ton of winners, a lot of small school guys doing themselves a lot of favors heading into the draft. But overall, that'll wrap up the recap of the Senior Bowl week. Let me know your guys' thoughts. Who do you guys think are the biggest winners? Who do you guys think the biggest losers are? Love hearing from you guys. I'll see you guys in the next one. See ya.